Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. So happy to be back here on a Monday. Thanks very much for being here with us on this Monday. We have a very, very good show for you today. Very good start to the week today. Second hour, Jason Everett will be here. Try to guess what Jason Everett's going to talk about. That's right. We're going to talk about chastity. Second hour, how to talk to your kids about it, how to live it, how to restore it if it is lost or something that you are seeking. It's always great to talk with Jason. This hour, Ask a Priest. If you've got a question to ask a priest, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Whether you're Catholic or not, if there's a question you would like to ask a Catholic priest, maybe it's a theological question, maybe it's a pastoral question, maybe it's a question about your prayer life, family life, whatever would be appropriate to ask a priest, this hour is the hour for it. 888-318-7884. And to do that, we welcome back one of our favorite priests, Father Paul Jerome Keller. He's the director of divine worship for the Diocese of Columbus, Ohio. He resides at St. Patrick Priory there in Columbus and just finished a sabbatical year. Glad to have you back, Father Paul. What happened? Where's Father? Okay. I was so happy to have Father back, and then he got so excited that he hung up on me or something. I don't know. We'll find out in a second. Those of you who are watching on the video see that I'm wearing my birthday hat because right before we came on the air, they gave me a lemon cake for my 59th birthday. I'm now 59 years old. And Father was laughing about my hat, and so maybe that's why we lost Father. Maybe he hit the wrong button laughing. Once again, the number is 888-318-7884. We'll have Father back here in just a second. I'll tell you how many lines are open. There's 4 lines open right now. If you have a question for a Catholic priest, whether you're Catholic or not, whether you're Christian or not, whatever you are, if you've got a question you've been wanting to ask a Catholic priest, this hour is for you. 888-318-7884. Let's try welcoming Father Father Paul Jerome Keller once again. Hi, Father Paul.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yeah, he's talking to me. I can see him talking, but there's no sound coming through. This is going to be good. Is this some kind of birthday prank you all are playing on me? I got my birthday hat on. I should not have to be going through this. Again, 888-318-7884, the number. And there are a few lines open, so your call's welcome. Edgar here to screen the calls. Father, we got you now?
I will give it a test.
Oh, yes, there he is.
Great.
Father, welcome back, Father. We're so happy you're here.
I'm happy to be back. Thank you very much.
Yep, but you got to work in a parish for your sabbatical year, and that's very, very nice.
I also did some work in New York City, or just north of New York City, in Hawthorne, New York. There's the Hawthorne Dominican Sisters, started by Rose Hawthorne, who's the daughter of Nathaniel Hawthorne, started a cancer hospital. So I worked there for about 3 months as well as part of my
Did you
change.
Really? That's wonderful.
It was fantastic.
They're amazing sisters, the Hawthorne Dominicans.
Yes, they are.
Well, I'm glad you got to do that, but I'm really glad you're back. It's very nice to have you on the air with us again.
Thanks.
And we have tons of calls already because,
Wow.
We took a little a detour there for a second. So if you don't mind, we'll just go right to the calls.
Sure.
All right, we'll start out. Let's start off with Chuck, who's in Ohio as well, in Cincinnati, Ohio, watching on YouTube. Chuck, we're awful glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Father Paul.
Yes, hello. Thank you for taking my call. It's been a long side. I guess I don't call enough. But anyway, so the question I have, it's related. There's 2 related questions of the same subject: Eucharist and mortal sin. So if a Roman, so I'm an evangelical. I'm not Roman Catholic, but I study Roman Catholicism as a subject, and people too, right? Because I have a number of them that are my friends. But if a Roman Catholic did not believe that the Eucharist was the body and blood of Christ, would that be considered a mortal sin? And if a Roman Catholic did not want to take the Eucharist over, say, like for instance, 6 months, he just didn't want to do it, didn't feel like it, would that be getting close to or is a mortal sin? So that's my question, or questions. They're related.
That's actually, I hadn't thought about someone just simply not wanting to take the Eucharist for a few months as a mortal sin, that it would really depend on their motive for not wanting to take the Blessed Sacrament, to take the Eucharist. Obviously, on the face value of it, it's an odd thing to not want to eat. So my immediate pastoral response would be, well, you must not be feeling spiritually well if you don't want to eat spiritual food. So I would investigate that. It's interesting you pose this as in terms of mortal sin. I'm curious as to why, because that's not the typical categories that Catholic, or a typical category that we think in with regard to just kind of living life. Mortal sin is a great misfortune, and we only refer to it, if I may say it this way, when we've gone off the track. So if we put it that way, and your original question is if someone disbelieves the Eucharist, again, my first reaction is going to be, why? What is it? Tell me what you're thinking, or what's the objection? What's the block? But obstinate refusal, say, of a priest to believe in this Blessed Sacrament would be a serious sin. Yes, it'd be a mortal. I guess we would say it's a mortal sin. He would need to go to confession for his disbelief.
So for a priest who rejected it, if he had a hard unbelief toward the Eucharist as the body and blood of Christ, that would be a mortal sin, but not somebody who's not Roman Catholic, who's not a priest?
Someone who's not Roman Catholic?
Someone who claims to be Roman Catholic but is not a priest?
Okay.
That would not be a mortal sin for them?
Tell me your name again. I missed your name.
My name is Chuck, sir. Thank you.
Okay, Chuck. Thanks.
Thank you for taking my call.
I just wanted to address you as Chuck. That's all. Chuck, I'm trying to figure out what you're really trying to drive at with regard to, is this a mortal sin? I'm not a Catholic who disbelieves. Again, I want to find out more information. Why don't you believe? I think that would really help me to understand whether or not a potential person is committing a mortal sin. It's just not black and white in the way that we're thinking or talking about it in our conversation right now. Does that make sense, Chuck?
Okay. It does. So, committing physical adultery is a mortal sin, right? Physically murdering somebody is a mortal sin. But a heart of unbelief, that's an extreme. A heart of unbelief is a serious matter. And so I was wondering, I'm not Roman Catholic, I'm evangelical, but I encounter people and I read, and even some of the, I'll call it internal studies of what the Roman Catholic Church conducts on itself, what their own parishioners believe. At what point if a Roman Catholic never ever did, somebody who claims to be Roman Catholic, if they never ever did to begin with believed in the body of blood of Christ in the elements, then were they actually truly Roman Catholic to begin with? How would the church view it?
At baptism,
are you
right? Someone's a Catholic as a result of baptism. Someone who doesn't believe has to be taught. So someone said to me, "Yes, I'm baptized a Catholic, but I don't believe in the real presence of Jesus Christ in the Eucharist." I'd say, "Were you properly catechized? What were you taught? Where did you go to school? And can we have some conversations?" Whether that person's in the state of mortal sin or not is a long way off in that conversation.
Oh, well, Chuck, I think we're going to leave it there, actually, because I got to take the first break. We'll take the first break. We'll be right back. I hope that was helpful to you, Chuck. It did sound a little bit like our terminology is different, that maybe we're not thinking of this in the same way, but you're always welcome here, Chuck, so I hope you'll call back again. We'll take our break. We'll be right back with more with Father Paul on Ask a Priest on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
One of the reasons we should go to Mass is because, if you look in the Catechism, you will see the fruits of Holy Communion. And these are remarkable things that we can receive at every Mass that we attend. We encounter the risen Lord, and He shares something of His divine life and love with us.
The Holy Sacrifice of the Mass, live from the EWTN Chapel, every morning, 8 Eastern, on EWTN Radio and Television.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Got it all straightened out now. Father Paul Jerome Keller, our guest. It's Ask a Priest. And our first caller was not Catholic, so we mean it, whether you're Catholic or not. If you have a question you'd like to ask a Catholic priest, 888-318-7884. We're going to Michigan now. Ronaldo is listening on 93.3 FM. Ronaldo, glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Father Paul.
How you doing? Thank you for taking my call. So I'm, I guess what you could say, prodigal son. Recently came back to Christ, and I'm a truck driver, so I usually out on the road, and I just tune into different stations as I'm driving, whatever catches the signal, and I usually stop on different pastor radios and stuff, and I get a lot of I'm genuinely confused. I was born, raised, baptized Roman Catholic, so there's a lot of things that every once in a while I have questions on. I'm really confused. I was listening to a pastor the other day. I don't know what his name was right now, but he said something about he was really against Catholicism. Let me just say that, and he was saying stuff like that Catholics sacrifice Christ every time they're in Mass, all over and over again, which it shouldn't be done because it was finished on the cross, and so they keep sacrificing over and over again. And then the second question was baptism. So he was also saying that we baptize children before they even have the age or the capacity to understand what's going on and stuff like that. So I was hoping you could shed some light on it for me.
All right.
Absolutely, Ronaldo. Thank you for your questions. I love that first question especially. Both of them are great questions, but the first one about whether Catholics sacrifice Jesus over and over again. I can actually understand how people fall into the trap of thinking that, because what we do at our divine worship, at our Mass, is to enter into the one sacrifice of Jesus Christ. It is not possible, it is absolutely impossible to sacrifice Jesus over and over and over again. He offered the sacrifice of himself once and for all. That's very clear from the letter to the Hebrews, for instance. And that one sacrifice, even if it had not been as bad as it was hanging on the cross, if it had just been any other offering of himself to the Father, shedding a drop of blood, for instance, could have been enough. But he went all the way to offer his entire life through death, through that ignominious death on the cross, offering himself to the Father in perfect obedience in order to make us one with the Father. And he furthermore told us that we were to repeat the sacrifice, not the sacrifice, the offering. We were to enter into that sacrifice that he offered when at the Last Supper he said, "Do this in memory of me." In other words, do what I have just done on Holy Thursday night when he took bread and said, "This is my body," and he took wine and said, "This is my blood." In other words, that was the first time that the Eucharist was offered, and it was a foreshadowing of the very next day a participation, not a mere foreshadowing, an actual participation through this man who was a man in God who was about to offer his life on the cross a few hours later the next day. But he told us to do this in memory of him. And it was for us to understand, how do we enter into this? So immediately the apostles and the early Christians began to celebrate the Eucharist as a participation in the one sacrifice of Christ, because what he did on Holy Thursday night and what he did on Good Friday, offering himself on the cross, are part of the same event. This is my body given for you. This is my blood poured out for you. He wants us to have his body and blood. Now, let me just say this, Ronaldo, and so we could go on and on about this, but it is absolutely necessary to give God gifts. And what that means, I mean, we owe him everything, right? And what the word for giving God a gift is called sacrifice. We give God something. And Jesus has made it possible for us. This is the amazing thing. Not only that he died for us and made it possible for us to have union with the Father, he also made it possible for us to continually offer a gift to the Father by giving us the gift of the Holy Eucharist. The Holy Eucharist is a participation in the one sacrifice. It's not a re-sacrificing of Christ. That's impossible. What we do at Mass every day, and on Sundays especially, is to enter into that one sacrifice. As for baptism, I'm trying to think of there are several scriptures that we could go to that refer to the make infant baptism important. For example, baptism is required for entering into heaven in John chapter 3, verse 5. Matthew, for instance, a servant is healed because of the centurion's faith. And Matthew 8, chapter 5, when that centurion is healed, it's because of someone else's faith. That's what happens in baptism. Infants are baptized into the Blessed Trinity. They receive the life of the Blessed Trinity, and it's through the faith of their parents and their godparents. Or the household of Stephanus in 1 Corinthians 1:16. The whole household was baptized, including his children and potentially infant children. So there are many scriptures, there are many instances that in the New Testament that help us to understand the importance of baptizing even infants.
Ronaldo?
Yes.
Was that helpful to you?
Oh, yes, very, especially the first question, because I always knew in my heart, especially when he says, when the priest is blessing the host and the blood, he said, he's reading from the Bible, and it says, "Do this in remembrance of me." It's in the Bible. He's telling us to do it. It's just when that pastor said it in that way, I got hung up on the actual word sacrifice. But as you explained it, it's a giving, it's an offering of doing what he told us to do. So that it was great. I appreciate it very much.
Well, Ronaldo, thank you. Whenever you have questions like this, if you call, you're always welcome to call here. But we also have a website, Catholic.com, where you can type in your question, and it has a very good search engine on it. So if you typed, is the Eucharist a re-sacrifice of Christ? Whatever, you do it in your own words, whatever. It will give you a whole bunch of articles and conversations, and in some cases videos. It depends on what the topic is. But usually on a major question like that, there'll be, a dozen or at least a half dozen different things there for you. So check out Catholic.com.
Okay. Thank you so much. You have a good night.
All right, Ronaldo, thank you very,
You
very
too,
much.
Ronaldo.
The number is 888-318-7884. If you have a question for a Catholic priest, it's Ask a Priest this hour on Catholic Answers Live. Father Paul Jerome Keller, our guest, 888-318-7884. Going to Chicago, Illinois now. Betsy, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Betsy, we're awful glad you're... Oh, well, Betsy, I was glad you're here, but she went away as soon as I said her name. Maybe Betsy will call back. Let's try this one then. We'll go to Rochester, New York. Andra in Rochester, New York, listening on 92.9 FM. Welcome. Go ahead with your question for Father Paul. Andra?
Oh, yes. I'm so sorry. Hi.
No, we're just happy you're here. Go ahead with your question.
My question is on something in Daniel. He talks about the fullness of time. And I actually only just heard about that a few days ago. And I'm really curious if you could just explain what he means by the fullness of time.
Do you have the particular quote, Andra, that you're taking that from? Or maybe I missed it when you were saying it.
I don't. I don't.
So when Christ comes, for instance, at the end of the world in the fullness of time means when things are complete. So it's a kind of biblical phrase that refers to at the right time, when the appointed time has arrived in the fullness of time. So
I did the concordance on it, and it's the fourth chapter of Galatians, chapter 4. But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son.
Oh, that is great. Thank you, Sai, for that, because Andra,
thank you.
This is an amazing thing. Why, many people have asked, right, why did Jesus not come 100 years before he became man? Why was he born, and why did he live at the particular time in the particular place that he did? Why not 1,000 years later? Why not in our own age? In the mind of God, and in God's plan, that is to say, that was the perfect time. God decided that he wanted to enter as a man into our world and bring us salvation at the time that he did. So in Galatians, and the fullness of time, that is in the divine plan, when God saw that everything was ready for his Son to be incarnate in the womb of the Virgin Mary, to become man, to live among us, to die for us, to rise from the dead, to ascend into heaven, to give us the sacraments. It was his timing. And this happens in our own lives many times as well, where why did this happen at this time? God has it all in his hand, and he has a reason for the timing of events. Does that make sense, Andra?
Yes. I really appreciate you just shedding some light on that. Thank you so much.
Andra, thanks for being there. We appreciate you being there when we went. That has not always been the case today. So on we go. Thanks very much for the call. We're going to go to Maryland, where Ann is watching on Facebook. Ann, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Father Paul.
I'm sorry I can't see you now because I have my phone to my ear. But I had some questions concerning purgatory. I'll give you a little bit of background. I was raised by two very devout practicing Catholics till their deaths at 94. And I went to Catholic school and CCD and feel I've read a lot about my faith. And I've gotten some information about purgatory that I find kind of distressing, and I'd like to know where the Church comes down on it. I hear that it's a fiery place. A year there could be as much as 2,000 years here. And I've also heard it explained as just a place where people go to be purified until they're ready to go be with God. And that it's not scary and it's not fiery, but we're not pure enough to be with him, and we have to atone. And then the second question I had concerned Fatima. I thought somebody who saw apparitions, lords, wherever it was, got to see purgatory, but in listening to Pray the Rosary on Facebook, it is said that the children got to see hell. And I would like to know, please, what that is supposed to be like, because it's my understanding that what would be most grievous to God would be for someone to separate him or herself from God's love. So I guess I'm asking for clarification on purgatory and hell, please, and with the children at Fatima Saw. Thank you very much.
That's wonderful questions. Can you hang on a minute? Because we have got to take a break. Yeah, I can't get out of this break. So we'll take this break, and we'll get some answers from Father Paul for your questions. Catholic Answers Live. Ask a Priest this hour, 888-318-7884. Are you ready to defend your faith in a world of unbelief? Join us at the 9th Annual Catholic Answers Apologetics Conference. This year's theme, I Believe in God, and it'll help you provide clear and charitable answers to atheism, agnosticism, and plain old indifference. Don't miss what promises to be the event of the season. Join us in San Diego from September 21st through 24th as we welcome our special guest, Dr. Scott Hahn, and an all-star lineup of great Catholic speakers. Spend quality time with your favorite Catholic Answers apologists and enjoy 4 days of fun, fellowship, and adoration of the Almighty. Seats are still available, but they're going fast. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com or call 888-291-8000 to register. Enter promo code EARLY and save $50. That's CatholicAnswersConference.com.
Want to know more about the origins of the Catholic Church? Joe Heschmeyer explores the beginnings of Christianity in The Early Church Was the Catholic Church. Joe digs deep into the words and actions of those who lived right after the apostles to refute anti-Catholic claims of how the faith was lived back then. Order your copy of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
What if the voice of your deepest doubts about Catholicism rose up in the form of a human being and challenged you to defend your most foundational beliefs? That's the task apologist Trent Horn took upon himself in his new book, Devil's Advocate, a dialogue with his own best objections against the faith that he professes and defends. You can stand up against your doubts, and Trent will show you how. Pick up your copy of Devil's Advocate today at shop.catholic.com or at a good Catholic bookstore near you. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. We figured out our little technical difficulties, and it was completely our fault, not Father's fault at all. So we have to make that right. We can't leave the impression that Father did anything wrong. Father Paul Jerome Keller is our guest, and it's Ask a Priest. If you've got a question, 888-318-7884. When we left for the break, Anne in Maryland had two questions, just clarifying about purgatory, especially because some of the stories about purgatory are disturbing, actually. They can leave one feeling quite uncertain. And the other was about the children at Fatima and their visit. Was it a visit to hell or purgatory, or what was that? Father?
Thanks, Anne. Thanks for those great questions. When you were talking about purgatory, you also wondered if there was a time element attached to it and fire and so forth. And then you also mentioned Fatima, the visions at Fatima. So I will admit right off the bat that I have not read all the accounts of the Fatima visions. That said, Fatima is an important apparition of the Blessed Virgin Mary for all of us. It's not a doctrinal teaching of the Church, however. So whatever it is that the children saw in that private revelation can teach us something about purgatory and hell. on the one hand. On the other hand, I think the essence of the messages at Fatima, the little that I have studied Fatima, is conversion of heart, so that we can see God face to face immediately at death, but just as important, that we can enter into a very deep relationship with God right now while we live on earth, right? That we have an intimate union with God through the sacraments and a life of prayer. As for your first question with regard to time, we might speak of purgatory as a long time. I think Our Lady did in the vision at Fatima, where she spoke about somebody possibly being in purgatory for a long time. What does that mean? What could that possibly refer to? What it refers to is the time, or what we would call time, or the amount of purification that someone needs. When I get a stain in my white habit, everybody's always mystified that Dominicans would actually eat Italian red sauce wearing the habit, because we can get pretty dirty. But so when I get a stain, it depends on what it is. If it's ink or oil, it's going to take a long time to get that stain out of a white cloth, white habit. And I think it's the same kind of image that we might have of our own lives. And you know what purgatory does? It removes all the hindrances that we have in our lives that get in the way of having complete union with God, enjoying the beatific vision, which means to enjoy the face of God. In other words, throughout our lives, some of us, more or less, depending on the person, develop attachments, disordered attachments to things or ways of doing things, or to people, our own ideas. And we get off kilter, we get off balance, right? So someone can have a disordered attachment to a certain kind of food and only eat that food and become very unhealthy. We can have disordered attachments in the way that we relate to people, either too much or too little. So it's those disordered attachments, those defects that we have allowed in our lives that need to be healed. So purgatory is a healing, a reordering of our disordered appetites, our disordered attachments. Some things take a longer time to heal than other things. I know a number of people, as a priest, I know a number of people who go to counseling. And sometimes counseling helps in a very short period of time, but there are other situations in a person's life that could be very deep-seated, very deep-rooted, and takes a long time. So when we speak, if we speak about time in purgatory, it's in that regard, like how disordered are the attachments that I have, how disordered has been my life. As for fire, that's a sign of purification, right? It's not a sign of punishment. And some people might use fire to punish other people, but think of gold or any other precious metal that or like ceramic, has to go into the fire in order to become pure what it is. So we melt gold and take out the dross. That would also be another image of the purification that goes on in purgatory. As for, I'm sorry, go ahead.
God, right? I'm sorry. And what I had been told about being made pure enough to be with God, you don't have to think of it as this scary, whatever place. That doesn't mean you're not going to have to atone, but at the end of it, who knows what the purification process is? I mean, one of the things they say at Pray the Rosary is to pray for people who have the same weaknesses or the same sins that you have performed. And I think that's very interesting, because at my age in life, it's really different for me to get up, and I'm working on a 5-year-old brain injury, which took the ability for me to walk and run and skip away, and has been very hard for me. And both my parents passed away a few years ago. I was spending like the last 10 years with them because I had empty nest. But I always felt like I was on the coattails of their faith. And when I think of them and what they would want me to do, I know what it would be. It would be to pray and pray and pray and try to keep nurturing my faith and believe. And it feels good to know that it doesn't have to be something you're afraid of, because none of us is perfect. And as I said, at this stage of life, I get up and think of, what do I want at the core of my life? I want Jesus at the core of my life.
Praise
that doesn't mean I go on the corner and stand about it. That means through my living, through my own little discipleship and ministries, whatever they are, like buying coats for homeless people in the winter, that's how you put them at the center of your life.
Let's get hang on, I want to get a response from Father to what you said.
That is so beautiful what you just said. You're absolutely right to have Jesus, to have God at the center of your life through prayer and taking the sacraments as well, going to Mass, offering a gift to God of yourself and in union with Jesus in the Eucharist. But also, you're right about we don't need to fear God. St. Therese of Lisieux, the little flower, said that if she would have ever committed a mortal sin, which she never did, the very first thing she would do is and this is often the opposite, I'm sad to say, of what most people do. If she would have ever committed a mortal sin, she would have run into the arms of her Heavenly Father immediately. But most people think that God hates them if they fail, if they sin. It's just the opposite. God is just waiting for us with open arms, very much like the father of the prodigal son. We don't need to fear that God is going to punish us if we turn to him, run to his arms and say, Father, I messed up, I've sinned, I've fallen. Please help me, please forgive me. There's nothing to fear in God. And you're right, I don't think the souls in purgatory fear either. I've not talked to any, but it wouldn't make sense for them to fear. It makes perfect sense for them to have great trust and to look forward to the day when their purification is complete so they can enter into the fullness of joy with the Blessed Trinity and with all the saints and with all the relatives. So that's something for you to look forward to as well, Anne.
Now, before we move on from Anne, because we do have to move on, Anne, because there's every line is full. Did we get to the Fatima thing, or Father, or was there more to be said? Are we?
I don't think let me just say this really quickly about Fatima. Anne, you're right. Hell is the separation of oneself from God. And God doesn't necessarily send a person to hell. A person chooses hell. Satan chose hell. He chose to rebel against God and wanted to be apart from God, which may sound strange to us. It certainly is very sad to think of someone wanting to be separated from pure love. But Satan did that, and other people have the capacity to do that as well. So hell, the suffering of hell, is the utter separation of the self from God.
And thank you so much for the call. As I said, I have to move on because we have full lines, but I really enjoyed the call, and I hope you'll call back again. Elaine is in Chicago, Illinois, listening on the EWTN app. Elaine, thank you for the call. Go ahead with your question for Father.
Yes, hello. I was just wondering, I heard that Jehovah and, made me forget what I want to say.
Yahweh.
Oh, my goodness. Yahweh. Thank you. It's in the New Testament. And then I heard that it's not.
The name Jehovah or Yahweh, which are different ways. I think are those both ways of interpreting in English the Hebrew name of God, Father?
Yes,
okay,
exactly.
So it would be the same if it was in the New Testament.
Yeah, if it were in the New Testament that way, yes, but we don't actually find God's name that way in the New Testament. We find that the Son of God is revealed and that he reveals the Father and the Holy Spirit to us. But we actually don't find the technical term is the tetragrammaton the 4 letters that are used in Hebrew for the name of God in the Old Testament.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Wait. So Jehovah wouldn't be in there. I wouldn't find Jehovah.
I missed what you said, Elaine.
I said, so I wouldn't find Jehovah.
In the New Testament, no.
The word Jehovah in the New Testament.
No.
I thought not. Okay, somebody say it was in there. I say what? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Elaine.
You're welcome.
We will take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Ask a Priest with Father Paul Jerome Keller right after this.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
EWTN, helping people grow in their love and understanding of God.
I just want to share that 5 years ago, my lovely warrior princess and saint of a wife and I decided to adopt a little girl through foster care. She is the perfect roundout of our family of 3 boys and her. Yes, there are challenges. Very grateful today for all the blessings that he has shown our family.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
EWTN. Teaching the truth.
So I listen to this show as frequently as I possibly can, and I love it.
Just started listening to EWTN a couple months ago, and I pull phrases and words off of the things you say so that I can use them to talk to him. And I wanted to say thank you.
Thank you very much. It really is it's a gift to have this opportunity. And thank you for what you do. I mean, if you two didn't do what you did, then we wouldn't be able to get to express what we do.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jason Everett's going to be here next hour. And, we're going to talk about chastity with Jason Everett. Of course, he's the founder of chastity.com and a wonderful, wonderful ministry that has changed so many lives. So if you have questions about sharing the church's teaching with kids, with young adults, maybe learning to live it yourself, you are very welcome to call and talk with Jason next hour, 888-318-7884. This hour, Father Paul Jerome Keller, our guest. And it's Ask a Priest. If you've got a question appropriate for a priest, this is your hour, 888-318-7884. Mark's in Dayton, Ohio, listening on 910 a.m. Mark, go ahead with your question for Father Paul.
Yeah, hi, Father Paul. I have a question.
Hello, Mark.
Hello. I have a question about one of the sentences that Jesus said when he was hanging on a cross. This is more of an Easter season, but we're not that far past. When he said, "Father, why have you forsaken me?" I can't understand. I thought that was settled the night before he was arrested in the garden, so I can't understand what that was about. So I'll get off here and
let's just make sure we have the question clear for Father. Though you just want to know, why did Jesus ask why the Father had forsaken him? Why did he ask that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, when he was on the cross. One of the sentences.
Got it.
Sure.
I don't.
Yes.
That's very clear. Okay. Father.
So, thank you for that question, Mark. Jesus is praying the prayer of the psalmist. So Psalm 22. Is the psalm where that line that our Lord is using. So he's praying from the cross, which makes perfect sense, right? The perfect prayer book of the church, of the Catholic Church, is the Psalms from the Old Testament, because they're written by God himself. They're the inspired word of God. So what does it mean that Jesus is praying about feeling abandoned? There are different ways that we can understand that. And in this case, we also need to speak about his human nature, right? He knew as the divine Son of God, and even as a human being, that he was not abandoned by God, but he had the feeling of it, right? We find in the lives of many saints that they go through a period, sometimes a lengthy period, of feeling like God is just gone from their lives. So it's a spiritual sense that they're alone. Are they actually alone? Has God abandoned them? Absolutely not. But I think the first prayer on their lips would be, God, where are you? Why have you abandoned me? Not because they believe that God has abandoned them, but rather that's the feeling, right? And so that we can pray it with the psalmist, which is an inspired prayer, I might add, right? So the Father allowed his Son to experience this sense of abandonment. I think that's important for us too, especially when we feel alone or abandoned, or that God seems distant. That he's still with us, but we can also turn to the Lord Jesus and say, Jesus, you experienced this on the cross as well. But our Lord also knew that his suffering was not going to last forever. He knew that feeling of abandonment was not going to last eternally, because the moment of death would come, that he knew the resurrection would happen. Our Lord Jesus was always aware that he was on the way to his resurrection, that death was not the end of life. So he's certainly not saying that, why have you abandoned me? Why am I dying? I have nothing left. No, he knew full well that he was going to resurrect from the dead by divine power. So when he says from the cross, my God, why have you abandoned me? He's applying this, he's explaining, or he's kind of telling us, if you will, that he has gone through this great, great suffering. Mark, physical suffering is pretty bad. I've worked in the cancer home, and that I don't think there's much suffering that's worse than physical suffering, that's worse than cancer. There is one kind of suffering, I think, that is worse, though, than most any physical pain, and that's feeling of interior abandonment by one's friends, to feel so alone, which our Lord also experienced in the Garden of Gethsemane and on the cross. Everyone abandoned him except his mother and St. John and St. Mary Magdalene. But that spiritual suffering, spiritual abandonment is so deep. I want to say one last thing, and we can go to the next call, and that is that our Lord Jesus never lost confidence in God the Father. Jesus knew that he was the Son of the Father. He never lost that kind of interior knowledge or sureness that his Father was always with him on the human level. The divine level, he was always in union with the Father, but on the human level, he went through the worst kind of suffering, even that kind of spiritual suffering where everything seems to be taken away from a person.
Mark, thank you. I am going to keep going to try to get everybody on here with Father Paul, but thank you very much for the call. I hope that was helpful to you. I'm going to Syracuse, New York, where Jack is watching on YouTube. Jack, thank you very much for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Father.
Hey, thank you so much, and happy birthday to you.
Thanks.
And thank you, Father, for and thank you, Father, for taking my call. I just had what I'm hoping is just a pragmatic question. I am a young married man. I've got my wife and 2 children. We have 2 and 2, so we're shooting for the scorebooks, I guess. But we're part of a Latin Mass community up in the Diocese of Syracuse here, and something that we notice in our neighboring diocese in Albany, and maybe a concern that we see across the country, is that there seems to be some restrictions that happen on the Latin Mass in general, and I was wondering your take maybe on it, or maybe just the overall pragmatics about it, in that as that happens in our diocese, I find that there are a lot of young people who are trying to live very faithful lives and be very obedient to their bishops and things, and it seems difficult with restrictions on, like, with the Fraternity of St. Peter or the Institute of Christ the King, to say that it might be very easy to go to, like, a Society of St. Pius X or something like that. And I was wondering your thoughts on the matter, and what kind of things that you've seen across the country in your experience.
Sure. Great question. Thank you, Jack. So the approach that the kind of mindset I think that we should have to current traditional communities, of which you said that you're a part, is to treat everybody with great love and respect, even if the preference is for an older form of the Mass on the part of some people. I actually understand that desire. I can sympathize with it myself. So I think it would be difficult for someone who is perhaps preferring the traditional Latin Mass to look down on people who don't. I think it's very, very bad as well for someone who doesn't like the traditional Latin Mass to look down on people who do. So there has to be, first of all, great respect and love, because we are all one in the body of Christ. That's the most important approach. And I think the bishops are trying to do that. When Pope Francis sent out the letter or the instruction that said that would curtail the use of the Latin Mass in dioceses, he said that what he was trying to do was to bring us into greater union through the reform of the Mass that happened in the 60s, with Sacrosanctum Concilium, or the Constitution, the Vatican Constitution on the Divine Liturgy in 1963, to be more precise. I think obeying the Pope is important. Going to a church that does not obey the Pope, such as Pius X or Pius V groups, is not at all helpful for one's salvation. The Lord Jesus did not give any permissions for us to be outside of the care of St. Peter and his successors. So I am deeply concerned on the pragmatic level, if we use that word, or what is the approach we're to take. I'm deeply concerned about the salvation of souls of people who separate themselves from the teaching magister, the teaching office of the church.
Jack, I want to come back to you just to see if that addressed what you wanted to address. Was that all helpful to you?
Yes, yeah. And to piggyback on that, if I may, it's strange to me, because I do see, and certainly so many faithful across our church in the United States, in the new Mass, in the Novus Ordo, and in the Latin communities. But there seems to be, and this is, I suppose, my subjective appearance of the issue, so many really young families in the Latin Church, the Latin Mass, I should say, excuse me. And I don't know, I see just in terms of demographics where so many children are being raised. It seems like a lot of children are being raised there, and I guess that kind of just works its way back into the original question. But I do very much appreciate your response, Father. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Jack. God bless you.
Thanks. I noticed the same thing. I'm among those who, if I were given a choice to go to the Latin Mass or the Mass in the vernacular, would choose the vernacular. I don't speak Latin. I don't know how to I can follow the book, but I find it more distracting. But it seems to me that, like in my parish, there's lots of young families there as well, and it's not a Latin Mass parish. It's just that it's a much bigger group. So you see lots and lots of elder folks, right, and that as well. Right. So I'm the
same thing.
Go ahead, Father.
Well, the same thing's true here at St. Patrick's. We have a packed church on Sundays, and our weekday masses are quite full as well. But the young families with children, I can vouch for it, because sometimes I can't hear myself.
Yeah.
Mass, with all the kids that are there.
But one of the reasons I think that their older folks might not be at the Latin Mass is they grew up with that. They lived with that, and they actually enjoy the Mass in the vernacular. But that's a guess. I don't know.
Possibly.
Father Keller, so happy to have you back. May we have your blessing before we go?
I'd be delighted. Through the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary and all the angels and saints, may Almighty God bless you all, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit.
Amen. Thank you, Father Paul. I hope we'll be doing this regularly now again.
Me too.
Now that we got you back.
Looking forward to it.
We're going to take a very quick break, and then Jason Everett will be here. If you have questions for Jason Everett, 888, you can start dialing now. 888-318-7884. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. As promised, Jason Everett with us this hour, and your questions welcome. 888-318-7884. You probably heard about this, but there was a sexual revolution, and it took a little while for the church to get her response in order to that revolution. But John Paul the Great, of course, made a great contribution to that in his Wednesday audiences and other writings and presentations that presented us with what's now called the theology of the body. But there are people who have made a special contribution in spreading that message, in helping the church make the response to the sexual revolution, which has proponents and advertisers and propagandists on every bit of media. So there have to be really talented, devoted, and loving people to present the truth about human sexuality as the church understands it. And Jason Everett has been one of the champions in that area. You can visit chastity.com to find out all about what Jason does. And you can just call him right here and talk to him, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Jason Everett, thank you very much for being here with us.
Yeah, it's good to be back on. Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to the day where you're out of business, where we don't need anybody out there proclaiming the truth about human sexuality and a truly human sexuality, because derived from the love that we've received in Jesus Christ. But you're not out of business. I imagine you're busy constantly.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's pretty good job security in terms of trying to talk about God's plan for human sexuality, chastity, gender, all of that. Unfortunately, good job security right now.
But the kind of I'll tell you about a story I read in on CNN. It says that and this is their wording, the anti-sex forces are out challenging, a positive view of sex, and their example of that is that there's some protests or some people writing negative articles about these movies that come out that are verging on pornographic. And so, what do you make of this idea that people they use the word sex positivity? And it seems to be related to really the basest, most adolescent behavior on film.
Yeah, what's kind of funny is the people who clamor the most about how natural sex is. Sex is natural, not a big deal. Those are actually the people least likely to actually have natural sex. Those are the people that when you say, okay, no contraception, no screens, one man, one woman, one wedding ring, second that, it's like, whoa, wait, no, we're not talking about that. It's like, so, okay, how natural is it if you're so afraid of natural sexuality? But what this really is at the core, I'm in the middle of rereading St. John Paul's classic Love and Responsibility right now. It was just yesterday going through the chapter where he talks about resentment of chastity. And he said sloth, as defined by Thomas Aquinas, is the sadness arising from the realization that what is good is also difficult. But at least with sloth, it recognizes there's a good, and attaining to that good is difficult, and I feel sad about having to exercise that effort. He said resentment of chastity takes it a step further, because instead of realizing the good, it realizes, okay, that's difficult to attain, so what I'll do is tear down the good, basically saying that's neurotic and unhealthy and unrealistic, so I can kind of lightheartedly pass it by, preferring what's more comfortable and convenient to myself. And so it's an outright resentment of the message of chastity, not simply an attitude of sloth towards it. And so that's what all these attacks are. It's realizing, okay, that is good, but what I'm going to do is actually going to tear it down so I look like I'm not turning down the challenge of what authentic love should look like.
Isn't that the truth? 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Jason Everett, our guest. If this is an area in which you struggle and you'd like some help, you are welcome to call. If you're a parent who'd like to know, how do I talk to the kids about this? When do I talk to the kids about this? You are welcome to call. And anybody else with a question on the Christian teaching regarding chastity, regarding the proper use of the wonderful faculties God has given us, 888-318-7884. 888-318-7884. For a liberation movement, however, the sexual revolution produced an awful paucity of actual liberation. Like if you concluded, say, I don't know, 50 years of a movement and it had utterly destroyed families, enslaved people to pornography, made men and women miserable, and would you still call that a liberation movement? But it is. But there seems to be no shame about that.
No, it's an enslavement movement, if anything. And if our listeners want to look up something real interesting on this, there's a research paper called Sexual Hookup Culture, a Review. And what this was is kind of a meta-analysis done by some universities, one of which Indiana University with the Kinsey Institute. They wanted to see what the prevailing attitudes were on college campuses regarding these hookup cultures that was going on with all the promiscuity. So they surveyed all these college students and asked them questions like, what would you rather have, a hookup or a traditional romantic relationship? And what they found is that college students, far, male as well as female, wanted to have a traditional romantic relationship over a hookup, but they were twice as likely to hook up as to even go on a first date. It's almost as if they ached for something they didn't know how to attain. And they asked the students, well, after a hookup, how do you feel? And 2% of them felt wanted. 5% felt proud. It just fell flat on its face. And so they were researching, okay, where did all this hookup stuff come from? And the answer they gave to me was really fascinating. They said, look, from an evolutionary biology perspective, they said, within mammals and all creatures, whichever sex has the longer reproductive rate tends to be more choosy with who their mate is. And so they said within human species, the female has the longer reproductive rate. For the male, it could take all of 5 minutes. For the woman, we're talking fertilization, gestation, lactation, could be years of her life invested. Because of one poor reproductive choice, she stands to lose a lot more. Therefore, women to be more choosy tend to be because of the investment that they're making. But they said what contraception did is it gave to women the reproductive rates of men. And as a result, women became as low in their choosiness as the guys were. And it bred this sexual hookup culture. And it was fascinating coming from secular researchers saying the fuel of the entire sexual revolution, the sexual hookup culture, was made possible only by contraception. And the fruits have been, to say the least, underwhelming.
Wow. 888-318-7884, the number. I think there are many people who you might even call allies in the effort to share this message of liberation in chastity, liberation that comes from faithfulness, but who would not be willing to go with you on the contraception thing. I'm glad to hear you make the connection, because I think many people would resist making the connection because, that's just one step farther than they'd be comfortable going.
Yeah, and they'll say, well, no, you need that, or otherwise you're going to end up with all these unwed pregnancies and abortions and things like that. But no, once we set our wills against human life, it's almost as if we're treating pregnancy as a disease. And if we're treating pregnancy like a disease, then, well, abortion must be the cure. And so you look at the abortion rates, the unwed pregnancy rates, these have not gone down as a result of the wider distribution of contraception. In fact, Planned Parenthood themselves, their own research institute, the Guttmacher Institute, actually said that the majority of unplanned pregnancies are caused by contraceptive failure, not by the failure to use contraception. Now, this is a staggering statement if you think this is coming from Planned Parenthood. They're saying that most unplanned pregnancies are caused by contraceptive failure, not by the failure to use contraception. Which means, okay, if that's reality and you're giving out more contraception, what are you going to get? More unplanned pregnancies, more abortion, more business.
888-318-7884. Jason Evert is our guest. We're talking chastity. If you'd like to debate the issue, you're certainly welcome to. If you'd like help with the issue or teaching the issue, whatever, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
One time somebody said to me, "Why don't you air these people?" And I said, "No, because I don't think they're Catholic." He says, "By what right do you have to say that?" I said, "I own the network."
Mother Angelica Live Classics. Tomorrow night, 8 Eastern on EWTN Television and Radio.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Jason Everett, our guest. Chastity, our topic. You are welcome to call. And as always, you don't have to be Catholic to call. We love these conversations, and we'd be happy to have you in on them. 888-318-7884. Maybe you're a parent with some teens that you would like to help. How do I teach this? How do I share this with my teens? How do I make sure that it's being received by the teen? You're very welcome to call. Maybe you yourself struggling with issues like breaking free from pornography and that kind of thing. Maybe you have online safety questions, gender questions, whatever it is. Jason's happy to take your calls. 888-318-7884. 888-31-TRUTH is the number. Jason, is this, I mean, you probably weren't born thinking, man, I can't wait to grow up and I'm going to be a chastity educator. But
high school dream.
Yeah, but it really has been a blessing for you, hasn't it? Because you've gotten to be. This is an important area that is often filled with shame for people, and you've brought a message of liberation to them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm spoiled beyond belief to be able to do this for a living and take care of our family, and then just the joy of getting to see the fruit afterwards of people, calling me 10 years later, emailing, "Hey, you remember you came to my town when I was, 15 years old, and this is what happened that night. And now I met her, and we've got 4 kids." And it's just overwhelming getting to meet the religious sisters, the priests. I came to a high school recently, and the principal said, "Hey, I was at this high school when you came and gave a chastity talk, and now I'm the principal of the high school." And so it's neat to get to kind of see it come full circle and to be in touch with some of these teens literally 10, 15, 20 years after the assembly, to see them still, thanks be to God, persevering.
But boy, when you tell a story like that, you it really comes across how old you are. You're very old.
Yeah, can't even imagine.
If the principal was there when you came and he was
I got to go to confession to a priest who heard me as a high school kid recently. So thankfully the penance wasn't too hard. He enjoyed the talk when he was a high school kid, so it wasn't too rough.
That's not fair. He liked you, so he gave you an easy penance. Come on. Again, the number is 888-31-TRUTH. We have a few lines open. I'm not exactly sure what's happening on line 1. Can I go to line 1 or not? I can't go there yet. Okay, so we'll work on the phones. We'll be there in a quick second. Jason Everett, our guest. We're talking chastity. It really is the case that you wouldn't be doing what you were doing, I bet, without Pope John Paul II. It seems like it all kind of naturally flows from his ministry.
Yeah, no, I don't know where, not only what I'd be doing, but who I'd be if it weren't for the influence of him in my life. I was really spoiled. I got to see him 24 times in life, in person, and just the radiance of his charisma, his interior life was so magnetic. I mean, he would just drive by you on the Pope Mobile, and it's like, okay, I need to pray more. I need to take my interior life more seriously just after having seen that man. And so the witness of his personal holiness, the gift of his writing, I mean, his book, Love and Responsibility, is really the foundation stone of our entire ministry intellectually, of where he talks about the word chastity needs to be rehabilitated. And you can't even think about chastity unless you're associating with the virtue of love. And so really freeing up that word from a lot of the negative baggage that's been associated with it, is frigid, neurotic, prudish attitude. What we need to understand is that chastity is that virtue that frees you to love, and it's the virtue that frees you to know if you're being loved. Because if I can't say no to sex, then saying yes to those impulses really doesn't mean anything. But then it also frees you to know if you're being loved. A perfect example of that, I was speaking at a public high school, and a girl came up after, dating this controlling, possessive, abusive older guy, treats her like garbage. And I said, "Sweetheart, you deserve a lot better than him. Break up." And she said, "I just can't break up with him. I've given him everything, my virginity, my reputation, my friends. I can't let go of it all." And I said, "Look, I know it's tough, but just tell him no more sex. Watch what happens." She said, "Okay, I can do that." Took off her necklace and gave it to me. She said, "He makes me wear this. He's really possessive and controlling. And I said, okay, I'll throw it away for you. And she left. And 5 minutes later, she came back, happy as can be. And she said, I dumped him. And I said, well, that was fast. And she said, yeah, I told him no more sex. And he slammed his locker shut. He threw a book at me. He said, where's your necklace? She said, I gave it to the chastity guy. And so you see, she just tested his love. Like, do you love me? Do you want me? Or do you just love the pleasure you're getting from me? And so chastity is that virtue that frees a relationship to see if it's authentic love or just use.
Again, 888-31-TRUTH. We'll start in Kansas. Brian is in Kansas listening on 101.7 FM. Brian, thank you very much for the call. Go ahead with your question for Jason Everett.
Yeah, hey, thanks for taking my call. Hey, I have a question about natural family planning and how it is different than contraception, at least from the way that I understand that it's kind of regularly practiced. I think there's some rules about who can use it and when. Is that not correct, or can anybody just use it for whatever reason?
Okay, very good question. Well, Brian, first off, I'd say fertility awareness methods, I think, are good for every woman to be using all the time. And what I mean by that is we just had a podcast recently with a bunch of college girls who've started up fertility awareness clubs on their college campuses. And they're learning to chart their cycles, and they're learning to realize, okay, look, this part of my cycle is irregular. I should check with the doctor. Maybe there's a thyroid problem. So if you're charting your cycle, you actually have your reproductive health chart in your hands. I had known of one couple that converted, stopped contracepting, used NFP, and while they were looking at their charts, they realized that something's off there, the husband said. I don't think it looks like it should. And they went to the doctor, and he said, yeah, I think something's off with your thyroid. The woman went to a thyroid specialist. Turned out she had a cancerous tumor on her thyroid. They operated the next day and saved the woman's life. But all of that would have been covered up had they been contracepting. And so using fertility awareness methods is not simply a tool to postpone or delay pregnancy. It's very good health-wise for a woman to be doing that. It's also great for couples to use if they want to plan pregnancy, because they're going to be able to pinpoint the time of ovulation in case they want to really heighten their chances of being able to conceive. Now, in terms of the morality of contraception versus natural family planning, a couple considerations. One, and for an act to be good, we need both the means and the motive to be good. In other words, my motive to use a natural family planning is if we got pregnant again, the gynecologist said my wife might die from that pregnancy. Okay, wow, we got a really serious reason here to use natural family planning. A couple might say, well, if we got pregnant again, it could kill my wife. Well, then let's just have an abortion. Wait a minute. The motive there is good. We want to take care of my wife's life, but the means is immoral, meaning abortion. Now, when it comes to contraception, you could have someone who had a good motive to use contraception, say the same motive, but is the means ethical? And so with natural family planning, the question is, okay, well then how is the means of natural family planning? Because you could have someone using NFP for a very selfish motive, and the church would not condone that, of like, hey, we want to have a 6-car garage and 3 jet skis and all that stuff, and kids are just a pain in the neck anyway. Okay, that's a selfish motive. And so even if you're using an ethical means of natural family planning, your motive is not good, and so the act is not good. And so in order for natural family planning to be good, you need both the motive, a just, serious reason to use natural family planning, and then the means. Now, okay, well, now why is it different than contraception? I mean, aren't you basically doing the same thing? First, we need to understand the church is not opposed to planning pregnancies. That's where people get thrown off. They think if you're doing any method of planning pregnancies, you're doing something unethical. No, that's not what the church teaches. The church teaches what we should not be doing is contracepting, meaning engaging in the marital act, in a sense, binging in that, and then purging out any life-giving effects. So we're going to engage in this act, and then we're going to sterilize it through a barrier, a drug, or whatever. With natural family planning, how it's distinct from that, a comparison is sometimes given between dieting and bulimia. So with a person who's dieting and a person who might be bulimic, they both have the same goal. I want to maintain a slim figure. But the person who diets abstains from fatty foods and practices temperance, and as a result achieves that end. A person who has the eating disorder, perhaps, maybe have the same intention, but their means is to binge on the food and purge out its effects. And so if someone says, well, I still don't get it, NFP, contraception, basically the same thing. Well, then it's like, well, okay, well, then use natural family planning. And be like, well, wait a minute. Well, that's a really big difference. Well, if there's a big difference in the method, it's a sign that there might be a big difference in the morality as well. And so the church will never tell you how many kids to have, but God will. And the question is, are we open to planning our family according to his designs? And the church's teachings is not, well, the only time you can have intercourse is when the woman is fertile. That's never been the church's teaching. And there are seasons every single month of fertility and infertility. And so if the couple is prayerfully discerned together, now is not the right time to put another pregnancy in the family, whether it's psychological, emotional, physical, whatever, they got a really good reason. Well, then we can fall back on natural family planning and continue to pray and discern, because maybe that reason that's present today might not be there a couple months from now. And so we can discern and prayerfully go through that together, instead of contracepting, which has a host of other ethical problems, such as the fact that many of those are abortifacient, especially the hormonal ones of the birth control pill. And that's an additional dimension of an ethical problem that is not present in natural family planning. So, Brian, does that help? Do you have a follow-up question? Was that able to seal the deal a little bit on that one?
No, that helps. That helps, especially what you said there at the end. If there's like mental health or alcoholism or just you're just so poor, because I thought it was set up to be practiced, but you had to have a good reason, not just. I didn't even realize that just you wanted to space out children was a good enough reason. I guess that's doesn't God kind of decide that?
Yeah, I think we need to be open to God's plan for our family instead of, what we're doing is when you get on social media, you'll see these new acronyms like DINK, which is double income, no kids. And they're sharing their pictures in Sicily and the Caribbean. And look at just him and I and all our Instagram photos and no kids, double income. I'm like, yeah, I think those Instagram photos are going to give you a lot of company when you're in the nursing home, 30 years from now, and you didn't have any kids because you just wanted vacation time. That's a punishment in itself. The sin brings its own punishments upon us. And so a lot of times we have this selfishness of just like, no, I'm done. I had to. Those are a pain in the neck. Why don't you take that to prayer? Because, I get it. It's tough. I've got 8 kids. It's like owning a restaurant where your customers never leave. I mean, it's a challenge. It's difficult. But I've never met anyone that said, yeah, our first 2 kids were a good decision, but numbers 3, 4, and 5, we kind of went overboard on them. What you hear is people saying, I wish we just had one more. I wish we were just open during that certain season of our marriage, that we were just too busy with everything else that didn't matter as much as the supreme gift of marriage, which is children.
Okay, yeah. But I just thought, when it was first proposed, that you had to have a really good reason in order to practice it. And it just seems to me like today that it really doesn't matter if you basically want to be a 2 income, the DINK, you can do that in the Catholic Church, and nobody says anything about you have to have a good moral reason. They're just like, well, you just do natural family planning.
Yeah, I think you make a good point, because a lot of people, when they get married, will just be like, yeah, well, we're using natural family planning right out of the gate. Okay, is there really a good reason for that? And they're like, yeah, we just want to take 5 years first to really get to know each other better before we introduce kids into the family. It's like, oh, you want to get to know each other better? Have kids. You'll get to know each other real good. It's so yeah, you need a good reason. You need a sufficient, just reason to use natural family planning, not just like kids are an inconvenience. Some people will say, well, NFP could be used in a contraceptive way. Technically, no. NFP could be used in a selfish way, and it's that sin of selfishness, that is the reason you should not be using it. But you can't technically contracept with an act that isn't contraceptive, because people say, well, isn't it the same? Okay, well, if NFP is the same as contraception, then at exactly what point does an NFP practicing couple contracept? Are they contracepting by being abstinent? Well, no, they're not actually contracepting. Okay, well, are they contracepting when they engage in the marital act with no barriers or pills? Are they contracepting then? Well, no. Then when is it they're contracepting? It's not a contraceptive act, but it could be misused for the wrong reasons of selfishness. And that's why the church encourages us to be prayerfully open to the gift of life and only use that if you have a serious reason to.
Brian, thanks very much for that conversation. Lots of lines full, so I'm going to keep moving. Jason Everett, our guest. We're talking chastity. Laura is in Phoenix, Arizona, listening on 1310 AM. Glad you're here, Laura. Go ahead with your question for Jason.
Hi, Jason. My question is more of a statistical type of one. My husband and I teach marriage prep in the Diocese of Phoenix. We do God's plans for joyful marriage. And in Talk 4, where it's about chastity, remaining chaste before marriage, a lot of people have science questions like, where's your basis for this? And currently I've been using Professor Janet Smith, her CD of why contraceptive. And it really works because I can say, 70% of kids when they're in 6th grade have sex now, or they do this type of sex. And I've got another article from 2013. But those numbers are all 10 years or older. And with COVID, all of our resources seem to have been depleted with surveys or the lack of surveys. So I was wondering if you have a resource or a place I can go to get some of these new statistics about how early people are having sex.
We'll have to do that when we come back on the other side. It's a good question. Right back. Want to get right to the core of Christ's saving message? Want a roadmap for living the life Christ calls you to? It's time to look again at the Beatitudes. In his new book, Heart of the Gospel, How the Beatitudes Show Us God's Plan for Happiness, Father Sebastian Walsh demonstrates compellingly how these 8 declarations make up the foundation, the essence, and the final goal of Jesus' teaching. Heart of the Gospel illuminates the scriptural passages from which we get the Beatitudes, explains the significance of their wording, their order, and their timing in Jesus' ministry. And it draws out edifying parallels and connections with salvation history in the lives of the saints. Most importantly, Father Walsh offers wise counsel from his own work as a priest and teacher to help you live the Beatitudes in your own life. Order your copy of Heart of the Gospel today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
Want to know more about the origins of the Catholic Church? Joe Heschmeyer explores the beginnings of Christianity. In the early church was the Catholic Church. Joe digs deep into the words and actions of those who lived right after the apostles to refute anti-Catholic claims of how the faith was lived back then. Order your copy of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jason Evert is our guest. You can find his work and all the wonderful stuff he does, and tons of stuff available at chastity.com, chastity.com. If you have questions about living a chaste life, maybe that's posing a particular difficulty to you and you would like some help, you're very welcome to call 888-318-7884. Maybe you're a parent or a teacher who'd like some help in doing your parenting or teaching in this area, 888-318-7884. With that in mind, Laura in Phoenix is on the line asking about where you get the statistics that you use. Laura, I kind of had to cut you off, but I think we got the bulk of your question. Did we get everything you wanted to ask, Jason?
Yeah. So places where I'd recommend going. We have a website, chastity.com, tons of statistics there. And specifically, we have a page full of the statistics with hyperlinks to the different journals where the sources are found, the primary sources. And you could go to chastity.com/seminars/statistics, and that'll land you right on the page. So chastity.com/seminars/statistics. And a couple of the ones you're going to want to check out there that we look at frequently. One, there's a journal that comes out called Mortality and Morbidity Weekly. It's very inspirational reading if you ever need it, but they've got a lot of good statistics in there. And then also, and most importantly, I would recommend the Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance Survey. Now, this is called the YRBS. And so just hop on Google, type in CDC for the Centers for Disease Control, then YRBS. The most recent report they've done was 2021. It comes out on a biannual basis. And that'll give you all youth-related risk behaviors of initiation of sexual activity, whether or not they're having enough vegetables and wearing a bicycle helmet and they're vaping and growing up in violent households. It'll have tons of sociological data, but it shows the sexual behavior as to when they're becoming sexual active. And it'll actually very interestingly show that the sexual activity rates of high school students has been on the decline for 30 plus years straight. 1991, they started charting it, and they've just showed a continual steady decline. We're back in the early 1990s, the majority of high school students were not virgins. And now, by a good significant margin, the majority of high school students are virgin. I think it's about 38% right now are currently or have ever had sex. And so the vast majority of high school students are abstinent. And what's interesting, about 2 out of 3 students who have had sexual activity admit they wish they waited longer. And so there's lots of really helpful information that you're going to be able to find at chastity.com/seminars/statistics. But you can go directly to some of these links by just Googling CDC and YRBS 2021, and that'll bring up the latest numbers for you.
Laura?
Perfect. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
and I appreciate your ministry.
Well, keep up the great work yourself.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks very, very much. The number here is 888-318-7884. Jason Evert is our guest. Before I go back to the phones, I forgot to read the ad, so let me just tell you, summertime book sale right now, $10 for some of our biggest sellers and for the new books out at Catholic Answers. 25 different books on sale at shop.catholic.com. Head over there. You don't need a promo code. Just spend $10. You get a good summer read over at shop.catholic.com. And now we go to Joseph. Joseph, thank you very much for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Jason Evert.
Yes, I had a quick question. If somebody is experiencing same-sex attractions and finds a person of the opposite sex that they're attracted to, should they still pursue marriage?
With that person? Or you're saying with a member of the other sex? No, the church would not teach that. With a member of the
opposite sex.
With a member of the... So you're saying, should they pursue marriage? Like, let's say you have a man attracted to another man. Are you asking if he should pursue marriage with a woman or with that man?
No, with a woman. If he finds a woman that he's attracted to, should he pursue marriage with that woman?
Okay, even though he also experiences attractions towards men.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I think for the most important thing would be full and open disclosure in terms of the future potential spouse, of letting them know that sometimes I experience these attractions, sometimes I experience those attractions, because she has a right to know right from the outset what's going on with this individual. Because if this is a very deep-seated same-sex attraction inclination toward other men, it could perhaps be an impediment towards that marriage in terms of, I'm going to marry you, but I'm actually more attracted to men of my, other men. And that could create perhaps an impediment to making a full gift of himself towards her. Now, we have to take this in context, though, that for the rest of your life, you and I, as well as everybody listening, is going to experience a broad range of millions of different sexual attractions until the day we die. The vast majority of those would not be ethical to act upon, but they're still going to come. They're going to pass in front of faces. Some are going to last. Some are going to be stronger than others. Some are going to exercise our will, but they're still not going to go away. They're still kind of knocking at the door. That's where we have to exercise our intellect and our will and say, yes, that's a strong temptation, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, I know this is the better way, and this is the direction I'm going to go. And so experiencing a passing attraction towards a member of the same sex, I would say, is not going to necessarily preclude somebody from entering into a heterosexual valid marriage with a woman. But if this is something deep-seated that's not going away, I would recommend that person perhaps talk to a good priest, talk to perhaps a good counselor of like, hey, what's going on here? And sometimes I just did a podcast recently with an evangelical pastor named Jay Stringer, and he's talking about pornographic addictions, unwanted sexual behaviors and desires. And his perspective is that we're going about it all wrong when it comes to helping people through these things. He said in his perspective, a lot of Christian ministry is teaching like your desires are the problem. You kind of got to white knuckle it and just forget about it. He said, I actually think that a person's unwanted sexual desires, temptations, and even unwanted sexual behavior is often a roadmap to that person's healing, because it's often crying out for a legitimate unmet need. And if we can listen with compassion to where that ache might be coming from, sometimes it could be rooted in a trauma that's unresolved. Sometimes it could be a family dynamic, an issue with the father. But sometimes if you can go to the root of that with some counseling and love and therapy and prayer, sometimes it can diffuse the intensity of that attraction where no longer is the obstacle that it had been in that person's life. And so you got to qualify a lot of things there saying, but again, to summarize, I don't think that having a passing attraction towards a member of the same sex could mean you could never have a valid marriage with a member of the opposite sex, but it should be determined on a case-by-case basis, preferably with a spiritual director. Hey, Father, this is what's been going on. Do you think it would be fair for me to pursue a relationship with a woman while this is still going on in my life? Or should I maybe look into this in terms of counseling and whatnot, and maybe it would lighten up to the point where I feel like a little bit more free to enter into a relationship with a woman that could lead to a sacramental marriage. So hope that helps out a little bit.
If I may just add, we recently had the great good fortune of doing an interview with Andrew Comiskey from Desert Stream Ministries. I don't know if you know, you do know of him?
Yeah, he's doing good work.
And I'd love it if you just go to Catholic.com and look up Andrew Comiskey, and you'll find that. But you could also go to desertstream.org, desertstream.org. They do wonderful work in this regard. It's very realistic. In much the way what you just said seems very realistic to me, Jason. That there is healing, there is help, there is a kind of the kind of modern way of thinking in very black and white terms about I am this or I am that, I have this identity or that, is really nonsense. And people find all kinds of help and move forward. And I think you'd really enjoy Andrew's story, Joseph. So I'll just suggest that to you, desertstream.org. Joseph, thank you very, very much for the call. That brings us to the break. We'll take a quick break. Our guest is Jason Evert. If you have a question about living a chaste life, if you have a question about helping others to do so, maybe your kids, maybe the kids that you teach at school, maybe you do a ministry like our caller earlier did, any question at all in the realm of chastity is welcome. 888-318-7884.
It's all about the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Church Pop takes a fresh and fun look at the news shaping our world, featuring engaging, inspiring, and informative Catholic social media content. Find it on Snapchat, Instagram, and on the web at churchpop.com. And you can get Church Pop emailed directly to your inbox. Visit EWTN.com and click subscribe. EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and His gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul street evangelists out in the public square sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. I knew it was going to be a good Monday show. I knew this was going to be a good Monday show. And it's not just because Jason Everett here, but it's mostly because Jason Everett is here. And you're very welcome to call 888-318-7884 if you have a question about living chastely or helping others to do so. 888-318-7884. And as you can hear from Jason, he's not averse to a challenge. If this Christian way of understanding human sexuality doesn't make sense to you and you want to challenge it, that's welcome as well. 888-318-7884. You just have to be nice to the host. You don't have to be particularly nice to the guest, but you do have to be nice to the host. Jason, have you got anything coming up? Any conferences, trips, talks that you want to tell us about? Or
let's see. Next week, I'm going to Live Action and near Los Angeles. Going to be on Lila Rose's podcast. After that, head into the Rocky Mountains. Going to do a wilderness backpacking retreat with about 25 young adults and 2 priests. We're doing a 42-mile hike up to a 14,000-foot peak while teaching them all love and responsibility and doing mass and adorations up above the tree line. Cannot wait for that. Hopefully I come back alive. And then after that, we got World Youth Day coming up in Portugal. And then we're leading a pilgrimage after the first semester of Chastity Talks in the fall in January, going over to Italy. So we just opened up registration for that pilgrimage, going to Assisi and Rome for young people, college students, families, grandparents. Everybody's invited to come to that one.
So when you go to World Youth Day, what do you do there? Do you bring a group there, or do you do talks there, or what do you do?
Yeah, Chris Stefanik and I will be leading a group of 300 teenagers and their families over there. So we'll be doing talks every single night. And then we're doing a talk that's being sponsored by the USCCB over there on St. John Paul II. And we'll be giving that presentation in Fatima.
I got a couple more folks on the line, and I am going to go to you, but we had Dawn call and couldn't stay on the line, and I do want to ask Dawn's question. Could you explain why marriage isn't just a social contract? Dawn wanted to know.
Well, it's not just a social construct or contract.
Excuse me, construct. I beg your pardon.
Okay.
You knew what I was supposed to say.
I just wanted to make sure you got the question right there. Well, one thing to look at is if marriage is just a social construct, why have we socially constructed it? It's because natural law points us to that. And so the church teaches that if we didn't have divine revelation, to understand God and the things of God, it would take a long time, it would take more effort, and it would be intermingled with a bit of error. And so you see primitive tribes having a spirituality. They're worshiping the volcano god, and they're offering sacrifice to this god. It's like, okay, well, they're onto something here, that there's a powerful being that is in touch with us, that we should offer something to. So like you see they're hitting on these true things because it's part of their nature to be a spiritual being. And so that's why we see, even in cultures that haven't received the Judeo-Christianity, that they already had created marriages with their own cultures, that they knew that, okay, when a man and a woman come together, they make a baby. And when a baby's around, it basically says, look, I'm permanent, so you guys should be permanent as well. And so marriage has always been a man-woman thing because, the very word matrimony means the duty of the mother. That's what the word actually means. And so it's always been tied to family life. And so with divine revelation, we're given through the book of Genesis and the book of Gospels that God created us male and female, and he's the one who instituted marriage as an institution that you should be freely entering into, of a total gift of yourself that requires fidelity and is ordered towards procreation. It's almost like 4 legs of a chair that we sit on. And if we pull out any one of those parts of the wedding vows and promises, the marriage ceases to be what God created it to be. And so to me, the very fact that some cultures have socially constructed marriage is not evidence that it's not a divine institution. If anything, it's evidence for that even before they received the gospel, they perceived in the nature of their being that this is a good upon which our civilizations themselves can be built. And when civilizations veer from that, and sexuality is no longer oriented towards marriage and family life. The studies have been done on that one, that within a couple of generations, those civilizations completely crumble.
Don, thank you for the question, and especially because it occasioned that answer. That was very, very interesting. Thank you very much, Jason. I'm going to go to North Dakota. Erica's in North Dakota. We're glad you're here with us, Erica. Go ahead with your question for Jason.
Yes, I worry that my son is 20 now, and I worry that he has some issues with masturbation and possibly porn. Mm-hmm. I know my husband struggled in those areas, not with masturbation, but lust and porn. And My husband was doing like forged and stuff like that, but
Okay.
I'm sorry. He recently passed away, and
I'm sorry.
he can't talk to my son about it no more. So I was wondering what I can do to help him, because he don't really want to hear from me about that stuff.
Yeah. Well, Erica, first, I'm very, very sorry for your loss, and I would invite every single listener who's listening to Catholic Answers Live right now to lift your family up in prayer. After this, if you're driving in the car listening, I want you to pray a rosary for Erica's family when you go to Mass this Sunday. If you could already in advance say, God, even if I forget this Sunday, that Mass is going to be offered up for the repose of Erica's husband's soul, for the consolation of their family. And so that way we can right now just harness the intercessory power of thousands of people listening to Catholic Answers Live, all directed 100% towards your family. So that's the first part of my answer. The second part of your answer, your son still needs to hear from you. You, as a parent, have been given an authority. And obviously, it's ideal when it comes from the father. And I'm sure, God willing, your husband, is interceding for your family still. But what I would say is you still need to speak. And so if you could share with him 2 resources that we've created. We have the Forged book, so if you can pass that on to him, it'd be helpful. And then also we have a book called The Dating Blueprint, and it's a resource that we created for guys to teach them dating etiquette. And so a lot of guys grab the book because they're like, I want to understand women, because we've surveyed thousands of women of what they wish guys knew about dating. But one of the biggest things we ask the girls is like, if there's one thing that you want a guy to get in order in his life before he dates you, what is it? And the number one reply is quit looking at porn. Don't bring that junk into our relationship. And so when it's coming from the women saying, we really need you to overcome this, because you can't ask a girl to commit to you if you're not even prepared to be faithful to her. You just can't do it. And so if it's just like an anti-porn book, there might be some resistance there, but if it's wrapped up in courtship of how to find the love that you were created to give and receive, then it lands a little bit more softly. It's like, okay, I want that, but now I understand that if I want what I truly desire, then I need to let go of these empty counterfeit desires. And so the Dating Blueprint book might be helpful. If he's still living at home, then I think it's an incumbent upon you to make sure you've got internet safety as much as you can. There's a router called Griffin that's really good to install that'll be able to allow you to see all the websites, and it can block the websites. You can even install something called Homebound with the Griffin router. So Griffin is Gryphon, and then Homebound is an app you can put on their phone so that even if they switch from Wi-Fi over to cellular, it still sends their web traffic back through the router, so you're capturing the data of all the websites they're visiting. Now, obviously he's 19 and he's out on his own, living independently, paying his own cell phone bill. It can be a little bit harder to set that kind of stuff up, but the accountability piece is huge that these types of technologies offer the family. But yeah, don't hold back. Keep speaking to him. And lastly, offer up your suffering right now for him. You've been given a tremendous cross right now. In a very real sense, you're resembling the Holy Family in the sense that Our Lady was a single mother for quite some time. All we know is that Jesus was with the Holy Family, the age of 12 or whatever, or Joseph was with the Holy Family. But then by the time Jesus begins his public ministry at the age of 30, Joseph's gone. And so at that point, somewhere in that window, St. Joseph passed away. And Our Lady was a single mother raising Jesus on her own. And so she knows what it's like to have that sorrowful heart. But if you can take that suffering that you're going through and offer up it as a prayer, that every time the suffering, the tears come, say, Lord, I don't know why this is happening to our family. This is obviously not the plan that I had in mind, but God, I take this suffering and I offer it up as a prayer, like incense for the conversion of my son, for the repose of the soul of my husband, for the future vocation of my son, so that none of that suffering will go to waste. So offer up that suffering, be assured of our prayers as well. And then the resources I mentioned, you could find at chastity.com.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erica.
You're welcome, Erica.
God bless you. Now, I have to say, people my age, we get nervous when you give the technological descriptions. Is it difficult, or is it relatively easy to do those technological things that you described?
Well, honestly, it's a pain in the neck.
Okay.
Because the teenagers are always like 3 steps ahead of us. Right?
3?
It's like, okay, I got this thing locked down, and they're like, oh, well, I'm going to go hack into the Pentagon's website for fun.
Right.
It's like they've got so much disposable time to figure workarounds to these kinds of things. And so, but you got to be vigilant. You got to stay in the game. And the router is only one piece. There's other apps like Canopy. If you've got like different types of smartphones, will have features where you can set curfews on the kids' phones. Covenant Eyes is a good resource. But the most important thing is the communication between parent and child. It's not a set it and forget it kind of thing. Well, I just need to do technology instead of parenthood. It's like, no, use the tools that are available, but let's get these conversations going. And yeah, it's going to be a little bit awkward, but it's not about having the talk. It's about creating a relationship where you can have a lifetime of these conversations, God willing.
I want to ask you still on the other side as well, because lots of young men like Erica's son, when they speak to us, they want to be free of pornography. Mm-hmm. They want to be free of this kind of, I don't know if addiction is the right word, but certainly compulsion.
Yeah.
So if it were not her who called, but it was him who called, and he said, Jason, help me. I'm 20 years old. I don't want this in my life, but I'm really having trouble breaking free.
Yeah. Yeah, we had so many guys coming to us like that, and even girls. This is not just a guy issue. For the girls, we wrote a book, Kelsey Skoke wrote, called Uncompromising Purity. It's not just a guy problem, where she really dives into feminine strategies of battling these temptations. But for the guys, I got with Matt Fradd, and I'm like, dude, all these guys come to me and say, look, I don't need to be morally convinced that porn is bad. I'm already on board there.
Right.
But I'm good for like 2 weeks, and then I mess it up. And then I'm good for a month, and then I get bored or lonely or angry or stressed out. Is accountability. Don't go Lone Ranger. Don't go, okay, well, it's me versus the devil. Yeah, that'll go real well. No, talk to your youth minister, talk to your pastor, talk to your parents. Hey, I messed up again. Man, you think if you tell someone you messed up that they think less of you? They think more of you.
Right.
Because you don't act like, oh, I got it all together. It's like, wow, this is an authentic dude. This is a guy who really wants to make progress in the interior life. And, I asked a priest once, hey, when students come to you and you thought they were all good and you found out they made all these dumb mistakes, does it make you look at them differently, to think less of them? And he said, no, I look up to them, not down on them, because they care more about what God thinks about them than what I think about them. And that is humility, and it's admirable even from a priest to see that. And so, yeah, have that humility, because pride comes before a fall. Humility is what's needed before we rise up. And so have some humility, find some solid accountability partners, and you can win this. You have to win this. Like, what's the alternative? Do you really want to be like a 37-year-old porn-addicted dad who's got to slap his laptop shut when your 5-year-old girl comes to the room one day because she can't see what dad's seeing? That's not an option. And even if we're in that spot, do we want to be there 5 years from now? No. Do what's got to be done to find victory in this area so you can be free to love.
That's the thing, though, what you just said there, because this is the other thing, is that we get lots and lots of calls from people who are convinced they really can't overcome it. And I think that that's part of the propaganda out there, is that's not realistic. You're not being realistic. And maybe they just need more stories of other men who say, yeah, you can be free of that.
And maybe what they're trying to do is like cut the leaves off of a weed, and they're not disturbing the root structure underneath this. Where's this stuff coming from? You might have tried 5 strategies that didn't work, and trying them 100 more times is probably still not going to work. But that doesn't mean that there's not a 6th or 7th strategy that you haven't tried yet that is going to be the key to your healing. And so the devil, when you're getting close to breaking free, that's when he's going to want to pour in the discouragement. You've tried this for so many years, and there you are again on that little porn website. You think God loves you. You think God could use you. Your family, you're such a fake. He's just going to double down, because that's who he is. He's the accuser. That's what Satan is. And so, no, as one priest told me once, he said, yeah, God knows your sins, but he calls you by your name. The devil knows your name, but he calls you by your sins. So don't let the devil call you by your sins. You're more than your weaknesses and your failures, and don't give up and let the spirit of discouragement overcome you. The Holy Spirit knows that you've got what it takes, because by virtue of your baptism, the Holy Trinity dwells in you, and you can win this.
Jason Evert, beautiful. Another great hour. Thank you very much. We always love it when you take the time. Thank you for doing this with us.
Happy to be on. Thank you.
You can find out, again, you can find what Jason does over at chastity.com. Do visit. And maybe you are that person that needs to be morally convinced. You'll find materials there that will help you be morally convinced as well. But if you are like the rest of us, just constantly in need of help and encouragement, chastity.com, a wonderful place to go and find that. That does it for us today. Tomorrow, 2 hours of open forum. Who's coming? Is it Tim Staples tomorrow? I think we got Tim tomorrow. Say it again. Oh, we got flannel panel tomorrow. I forgot. Tomorrow's the big flannel panel day. Holy smokes. Don't miss that. The news of the world from a Catholic perspective. Tomorrow, flannel panel, Catholic Answers Live. See you then. God willing.